in to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of...
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks.
Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick lays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for Wednesday, August the 14th, the year of our Lord 2024. This is episode number 1544 as we continue to count down to kickoff, and today's Countdown to Kickoff is brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, Lancaster area. You know I'm talking about Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, the big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue. Nana's Porch has got you covered. Maybe you just want to order some food for a tailgate or a watch party. Better go get your request in early. Not a lot of bookings available for Nana's Porch. They're already booking into 2025, but if you get in early enough, maybe they can drop your food off. You can have that watch party in week 2 if you're not going up to Lexington for the Kentucky game, and enjoy some great Nana's Porch food, including the award-winning pimento cheese, voted both number 1 and number 2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. So I strongly urge you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business by going to nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Tell them I sent you. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right, so we've been counting down the days to kick off on Saturday. It was 21 days to kick off. Of course, that's Marcus Lattimore, the all-time leader in career touchdowns at South Carolina, led the Gamecocks in 2010 when he was a true freshman. He was an All-American, first-team All-SEC, led the Gamecocks to their only SEC Eastern Division title and into the SEC championship game, where unfortunately they had to take on Scam Newton and Auburn. And it kind of got away from the Gamecocks. And then, of course, Lattimore came back. His sophomore year was playing great. Headed for another All-America year. Had the knee injury. Junior year, same thing. I was there at the Tennessee game. Just terrific. But Marcus Lattimore, the all-time number 21, at number 20 on Sunday was Bryant Mookie Gilliard. He was first-team All-South in 1984 as we celebrate the 40-year anniversary of the 1984 Black Magic team and the Fire Ant defense. Gilliard probably should have been an All-American. He led the nation in interceptions with 9. He had 4 of them against Florida State. If you want to hear the story about that, you'll probably need to listen to Monday's podcast. Maybe we'll get into it with Alex Jones. Also, a guy I didn't think about that wore number 20, Scott Windsor. Just a big hitting safety, outside linebacker type. He knocked Nebraska's quarterback into the middle of next month in that game at Lincoln in 1987. And Tom Osborne was throwing the ball then. Then they didn't have anybody that could throw it. They just lined up and ran it. And South Carolina couldn't stop them. They were undersized on the defensive line, which ultimately led to the steroid scandal in 1988. At number 19 on Monday, that was Jake Bentley, his freshman year. He graduated early, came in after his junior year, got ready, started the final 7 games of that season, and got Will Muschamp's team bowl eligible in 2016. Then he switched his number after that. Number 18 yesterday, of course, Steve Tannehill. We played the clips of the 2 touchdown passes at Clemson in 1992. And today's countdown to kickoff is number 17. And everybody knows who that is. Okay, you may not remember Mookie Gilliard. You may not have remembered Steve Wadiak at 37. Hell, I didn't see him play. He played right after World War II. But everybody remembers Xavier Legette. Basically had a pedestrian college career up until last season. As a freshman, he played in 11 games with 9 receptions for 80 yards. As a sophomore, played in only 6 games in 2020. That's when Mike Bobo told everybody, after we were wondering where he was, oh, yeah, Xavier Legette, he had a season-ending injury. Just 7 catches for 113 yards in 2021. Shane Beamer's first year, you had Josh Vann and Jalen Brooks. 11 games, 8 receptions, 63 yards. In 2022, he started to show signs of life in the second half of the season. Probably that year, his biggest 2 plays were, one, the 100-yard kickoff return against Texas A&M, which just took the roof off Williams-Brice Stadium. It just exploded. And then the unbelievable 41-yard catch that they were touchdown catch in the Gator Bowl that they reviewed forever against Notre Dame. But this past season, particularly in the absence of Juice Wells, Xavier Legette, not just first team All-SEC and third team All-American, Senior Bowl All-American, second team All-SEC, All-Purpose, a Blanchard Rogers Trophy finalist, a Rex Enright team captain, the Steve Wadiak co-team MVP, and the Steve Spurrier Award winner as the MVP on offense. He was the most outstanding senior. He was the Biletnikoff Award semifinalist, and he was the South Carolina Male Athlete of the Year for the 23-24 season with 71 receptions, which I believe ranks 5th all-time in a season, 1,255 yards, which was 2nd all-time. He averaged 17.7 yards per reception, 7 touchdowns, 1,246 all-purpose yards, because I guess he had some minus yards rushing, but think about how porous as we bring in Alex Jones from the Big Spur. Alex, we've been started with our Nana's Porch countdown to kickoff. We're 17 days away from kickoff. I don't know if I've ever seen a guy explode like Xavier Legette, who was pedestrian for 4 years. Even like at the beginning of last year, I had Clark Brooks, the SEC stat cat, and he said Xavier Legette's first 3 or 4 years at South Carolina, you didn't want to throw him the ball because he had a higher drop rate than he had a higher catch rate. But last season, I think propelled by the strong second half of the season in 2022, just a phenomenal year. And just to give you an idea of how porous South Carolina's receiving core was, Xavier Legette, 71 receptions were more than the next two guys, which, by the way, one of them, they were both tight ends that had the next highest totals, which was 65 combined catches as we welcome you in. I don't think that's going to be the case this year, but Alex, I kind of see the bags under your eyes. I'm sure not getting a lot of sleep because you're up and at them at the proving grounds every chance they let you guys in. Welcome in. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Hey, we're 17 days away from kickoff. You know, I'll take the no sleep if we can get some college football.
And we're only 10 days away from week 0.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll take any type of football.
Yep. 17 days away from Carolina and Old Dominion at 4:15 on the SEC network. So, Alex, I mean, we got to be really optimistic about this team because South Carolina only has 7 top 25 ranked opponents according to the AP on the schedule. I mean, you've only got 7 of the top 25 teams on your schedule. And when I look at it, you look at Georgia, who's number 1. We don't play them. Okay. Alabama is next then at 5. Ole Miss at 6 with the aforementioned Juice Wells. That game will be at Williams-Brice Stadium. Missouri comes in at number 11. That'll be at Williams-Brice Stadium. LSU, number 13. That'll be at Williams-Brice Stadium. At number 14, Clemson to finish the season. At number 16, Oklahoma. And number 20, Texas A&M at Williams-Brice Stadium. And so 5 of your 7 ranked opponents you get at home, which, as we all know, particularly when the sun goes down, some special things have been known to happen at Williams-Brice Stadium.
Yeah, they have plenty of opportunities this year at home to, upset some ranked opponents. And we'll see kind of where those teams are, especially kind of those later in the season teams are. But, yeah, South Carolina's schedule this year is really no different than any year. It's always going to be difficult, but it's crazy to think that they have 7 ranked opponents on the schedule, and that's not Georgia or Tennessee, who they normally play every year.
That's right. And Florida has 8 preseason top 25 opponents, and they play 10 10 teams that probably could beat them because they play they open with Miami, then they play Samford, which is really like their only cream puff. They play Texas A&M. They don't play Vanderbilt. And they have FSU and UCF, the Gus Bus, who, by the way, they have KJ Jefferson running the offense that, of course, Cam Newton ran for him at Auburn and others. I don't know if Sunbelt Billy makes it past mid-October. I looked at their schedule. They could be 1-5 going into their open date before they get Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, and especially that week 1 game, like they jump right into it. I mean, I think that game's in Gainesville too, Miami. Like, I mean, you're jumping right into it with 2 teams that are really going to be desperate for that opening week win. And man, I think we'll learn a lot about Florida in that game, but they need that game to really kind of boost themselves because, as you mentioned, they don't have an easy schedule. Really, only I guess you mentioned that Samford game is about the only game that you can say that's a win. But I mean, that schedule is something else.
It really is. All right, so let's dive into the Gamecocks here. So yesterday, offensive players met with the media. You were there. Maurice Brown, who, by the way, Shane Beamer after Saturday scrimmage, and I called this back in the spring. I called it in the preseason, right before fall camp started. This would be a guy to watch out for. I think going into the season, Alex, before practice started, that Maurice Brown was on your list of offensive players that would probably be out for media availability after the first scrimmage. 6'3", almost 255, and clocked at 21.9 miles per hour, which, by the way, that's Debo Samuel speed.
Yeah.
Not quite Xavier Legette speed on that 75-yarder against Mississippi State last year. But give me your just overall takeaways from what you heard from the offensive players and just your thoughts on Maurice Brown, who I'm wondering why Shane Beamer hadn't already put him on scholarship. They put Ronnie Porter and Bradley Dunn on scholarship Sunday night, I guess, after practice. Yeah. Your thoughts on Maurice Brown and his ascension from special teams player to being on the depth chart at tight end, and just takeaways in general from the offensive players from yesterday.
Yeah, with Maurice Brown, he's a really interesting player because obviously came in as a walk-on last year, and he, as a true freshman, walk-on, just maybe a little bit, maybe not undersized, but just needs to continue to bulk up as a freshman, but really made an impact on special teams. I think played in all 12 games on special teams, which, that shows that they have a lot of trust in you, especially in the South Carolina program, for them to put you on special teams. And then this year, I remember when they released the official roster and we looked through who's gained weight and lost weight. He was one of the biggest gainers on the team. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was above 20 pounds. And when we've seen him in practice and then yesterday talking to him, he's obviously bulked up and looks really, really good physically. So, with that tight end room, it's really interesting. Coming into the camp, you kind of thought there's some potential there, but because you knew what Josh Simon was, and you knew what Brady Hunt could bring. It's just him coming off that injury, but we saw what he could do at Ball State. But now you got 2 guys, like Michael Smith and Maurice Brown, who have apparently flashed during camp, and I think there's some real depth in that tight end room who can make a big impact this year.
I mean, no doubt about it. And Michael Smith, Hale, I guess, was at practice. You were there. They had the one-on-ones. The media was at Sunday's practice, and Michael Smith makes this twisting, leaping grab over Nick Eamon-Wari and gets the foot in, down for the 1 foot in the back of the end zone. And the first scrimmage, I think Joshua Simon probably was not out there, just like Rocket Sanders and some of your veteran SEC guys that can play were not out there. And that gave Michael Smith a chance. And by all accounts, he had a really good scrimmage. But that catch was spectacular in making that move on Nick Eamon-Wari. I mean, everybody talks about Nick Harbor from last year. Everybody talks about Dylan Stewart in this class. But, I mean, the guys I'm hearing the most about are Michael Smith, Matthew Fuller, and Mazio Bennett. I think those are really three guys to watch on offense, even though, Matthew Fuller has got several guys he's probably got to jump in these next couple of weeks. He's not your typical true freshman running back by any means. I've heard he may be outside of Rocket Sanders, the most physical back on the team.
Yeah, and kind of thinking back to what we heard yesterday from some of the offensive players, Oscar Attaway was asked about Matthew Fuller and what he's seen from him and offered some pretty high praise for him, saying, he's got all the tools in the toolbox. He's going to be a guy who, I'm going to help mentor this year and get him ready for these next few years. Because when you look at him, he does not look like a true freshman, especially from what we've seen in practice. And really, a lot of those guys in this 2024 class just physically do not look like true freshmen and are ready to go. And Matthew Fuller is definitely one of them. Michael Smith, you mentioned him, that catch. Yeah, I was over watching something else at practice, but saw the videos and all that. And that was an incredible catch and a really good throw from Robbie Ashford too. Shane Beamer mentioned Michael Smith and both Maurice Brown. Both of those guys are going to play a lot this year. And I think that's going to be the case. Just with Michael Smith, it's going to be transitioning to the college level, is going to be blocking, a lot of bigger guys, but I think he's ready to do it. And Mazio Bennett, yeah, he's another one. He's got a good chance to start, I think. And even if he doesn't start, I think he's going to play a lot. Thinking back to spring practice, he had that nice catch in the spring game with that kind of that dive and catch on third down. I think it was from Robbie Ashford too, and just has continued to flash. And I think they really, really like his potential. And even if he doesn't start, I think he's going to play a lot this year in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's one guy that plays with a chip on his shoulder, and he's used to the big moments on the Friday Night Lights. We want to see that carry over. So we're looking at that offensive position battles. I mean, to me, the biggest one is at wide receiver, right? Like, I think this Saturday at the second scrimmage, to me, that's when you got to get a really good idea. Like Vandrevius Jacobs, he did not participate in the first scrimmage, but I mean, by all accounts, he may be South Carolina's best wide receiver right now. And so I'm anxious to see how he fares in Saturday's scrimmage. But, I mean, Tyshawn Russell, Delvon Campbell, and then Nicholas Harbor. The curious case of Nicholas Harbor. The only guy in the history of Bruce Feldman's freak list, which goes all the way back to Jadeveon Clowney, okay, he's the only guy to be ranked number one both years. But, Alex, when are we going to see it translate onto the football field? And will it be at wide receiver, or could it be next year at a different position?
I mean, yeah, I guess it could be with Harbor. I think it's just, everybody knows his speed. Everybody knows how fast he is, but there's just so much more into playing wide receiver than being fast. You got to be a good route runner. You got to have good hands, and I think he's put the work in after getting done with track in the spring. He's even during track he worked over at football, but now in that summer I think he's put a lot of work in, and it's going to be interesting to see just how improved he is, because he's got all the talent or all the speed in the world. And obviously there's a lot of expectations on him coming into this season. And the opportunity is there for him to rise, especially, with all the, I guess, maybe uncertainty of who's going to step up at wide receiver. But, I guess we'll see starting in a few weeks.
All right. So outside of Mazio Bennett and Vandrevius Jacobs, I mean, what are your best bets? If the first game was Saturday, who do you think would be those top 5 or 6 guys?
I'd probably put. We'll start with Dre Jacobs and Delvon Campbell. I think he's got a chance to have a good season this year. Mazio Bennett, Gage Larvadain, Jared Brown, Tyshawn Russell. I think is who I'd put in there. I think I've hit everybody. I think that's who I'd put in there.
You know what? That's my top 6 as well. We had the Garnet and Black town hall for our VIP subscribers last night, and I brought up my top 6, and that's who it was. And they're like, no, Nick Harbor. And I'm like, hey, you got to remember, Nick Harbor didn't touch a football from, Clemson week until he decided not to go to the Olympics in June, late June. He ran indoor track season, then regular track season, then you had the SEC meet and the Nationals out in Eugene, Oregon, and then he runs 10.10 in 100 meters, 20.20, which made him an automatic qualifier for the Olympic trials in the 200 meters. He chose not to go. And the first time Mike Furry worked with him was the first day of fall camp. And so how big is the learning curve and how quickly can he adjust? And let's face it, catching the football is just not as natural to him as it is to others. But if Mike Furry can coach him up, he could really be a game changer because of the size and the speed. If he could prove himself, defenses would have to adjust, which could really open up the field for other guys. Nobody's as fast as Nick Harbor.
Right, yeah, and that's a good point there. Like, even whenever he's on the field, and this goes back to last year, defenses have to account for him because, if you let him just run straight down the field, he's probably going to get past you. So, I mean, at the very least, he can at least help open up some of those other receivers. And, I didn't include him in that top 6, but, week 3, I don't think we'll learn a whole lot week 1, but week 3, I think, he could easily work on his way in there. And, I think that kind of goes for that whole receiver room. Like, we'll learn a lot after week 2 at Kentucky, and who knows, he could rise right to the top of that wide receiver room.
I mean, certainly the receiver rotation could be different in October than in September. I couldn't count out a guy like DeBron Gatling either, particularly when you hear the way Mike Furry talks about him and how high his floor coming in is, and then how it could shake out with Larvadain, Russell, Campbell, Harbor, Jacobs, Bennett, Amari Huggins, Bruce. I mean, but that's what you get when you have 5 transfer portal wide receivers, 2 true freshman wide receivers, and 2 sophomore receivers, and then 2 guys that didn't play last year in CJ Adams and Elijah Caldwell. I mean, there's just a lot of unknowns when your leading returning wide receiver on your roster only had 12 catches last year.
Yeah, and when you bring in 5 transfers or 5 wide receivers from the transfer portal, like, you've completely revamped that wide receiver room. And it's just, we kind of went into this preseason camp kind of with the unknown of, who's going to rise. And I think we're seeing some guys rise to the occasion so far. We mentioned Dre Jacobs, Mazio Bennett, and those guys. Like, I think we're starting to see a little bit of a rotation. And I think we'll learn a lot after the second scrimmage right here of who's really going to be those top 4 or 5 guys in there.
Yeah, I mean, I call the second scrimmage moving day because that's when you're going to move on from some guys and you're going to move on with other guys, and not just at wide receiver, but in particular the offensive line. I think we know Vershawn Lee's going to be the starting center. We know Cason Henry, as long as he stays healthy, knock on wood, he'll be the right tackle. But, you got Josiah Thompson and Tree Babalade battling it out at left tackle. I think Kamar Bell does have a leg up at left guard simply because Ja'Kai Moore and Marquis Anderson have, did not scrimmage in the first scrimmage. They've been banged up, seen off to the side with the training staff. Torricelli Simpkins and Trevon Ball at right guard. Simpkins could also slide in at center. That was his position at North Carolina Central for 3 years. You got Ryan Brubaker there. And then I think you got Aaron Park, who could be your swing tackle behind Kason Henry. And, if Josiah Thompson is that dude on offense, which we've seen at Alabama, at Ohio State, at Alabama, FSU, Florida. So, the great programs, the Blue Bloods, they get these 5-star guys, and they're that good. They can come in and immediately play. I think Tree Babalade, it could throw a wrecking ball into your guard position because I think you got to find a spot for that guy.
Yeah, and I think if Josiah Thompson ends up beating out Tree Babalade at left tackle, I think it says more about Josiah Thompson than Tree. I think we knew how good Josiah Thompson is, obviously being a 5-star coming in, but big thing for him was, just continuing to put on weight. I think he was at maybe 265, but, talked to him after spring practice, and he said he was eating 8 meals a day to get his weight up, and is now up to 300 and looks awesome out there. So I think it'd say a lot about Josiah if he more about Josiah than Tree if he lands that left tackle spot. But yeah, it's really kind of crazy talking about this offensive line because in previous years, we've talked about maybe 5 or 6, 7 guys or so who legitimately had a chance to start. But this year they've got some legit depth, and especially that guard spot. You can think about maybe 4 or 5 guys who could earn that starting spot at guard. So, in the long run, I think that's a great thing for South Carolina because you're always just going to have injuries. It's just a thing. And you just hope it's not to last year's impact or what it had on the offensive line, but they've got some serious depth there. And I think they're getting pretty close to seeing who that top 5 is. And again, like we mentioned, that second scrimmage is really when they're going to nail it down more than likely.
I mean, no doubt about it, Alex. I mean, when you look at it, at left guard, Kamar Bell, Ja'Kai Moore, and Marquis Anderson are all capable of playing that position. And on yesterday's pod, I did 5 second-year players that need to make a big jump for South Carolina to have a successful season. And Marquis Anderson was on that list because if you think back to last year, he was the only one of that highly touted freshman O-line class that came in early. He went through winter. He went through spring. He went into fall camp, and then he got injured for about the first half of the season. Shane Beamer said, yeah, this will probably be the week we get him back. Then, Marquis out for the year. And so, he has a great winter. He goes into spring practice, and right before the spring game, back spasms, and now he's missed the first scrimmage again. He was the highest ranked member of that offensive line class and a legit 4-star guy that was one of the top 10 interior offensive line recruits in the country that year. And if he gets healthy, they've just got to unlock the potential with him. But right now, all he's got is potential because he hadn't been on the field.
Yeah, I mean, the key with him is just, as you mentioned, staying healthy. It's just, it hasn't happened so far in his career at South Carolina. And, I'd have to imagine when we've been at practice, he's been off to the side, but still, he and Ja'Kai have been off to the side, but still fully padded up and, going through practice, just maybe not doing what everybody else is doing. So from a starting standpoint, I think that's probably put him a little bit behind at that left guard spot. I think I'd probably lean towards Kamar Bell there right now. But at the very least, if he's healthy this year, that's pretty quality depth that you can have at the guard position.
All right, so we talked about running backs. Look, Rocket Sanders, it's your job to get him to the first SEC game of the season healthy.
Yep.
To me, that guy's a veteran guy. Brad Lawn used to tell me all the time, all the message board mob would go nuts when Travian Robertson and Melvin Ingram or Clowney weren't scrimmaging. He's like, Keith, they don't need to scrimmage. I know what they can do. It's my job to get them the first game healthy. I'm trying to build depth, and all these people are going nuts, right? And so, that is a deep running back room. South Carolina has completely flipped that. I will mention, I think, Lenora Sellers is probably like minus 800 to be the starting quarterback, and Robbie Ashford's probably like plus 550. But I do think he can be valuable because I don't think you want to run Lenora Sellers a ton. And kind of the most interesting comment from the players yesterday was Case and Henry talking about how they're going to be a ground and pound offense. And I think it's a luxury to have when you have Lenora Sellers, who next year could be on Bruce Feldman's freak list at 6'3", 245 and, 4.41 in the 40. But Robbie Ashford at 6'3" or 6'4", 230, who's a 4.5 or sub 4.5 guy that you can put in and, still run your offense and have more quarterback run game.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to what you were saying about Rocket Sanders not playing in a scrimmage, I think you kind of just have to look around to see what's happening around the country right now with top running backs. You think Texas has lost 2 of them, the season-ending injuries. A&M, Ruben Owens is out for the season. Kentucky yesterday, Trip Trainum is going to be out potentially for, the Kentucky game. So it's happening all around the country, and I don't blame them for not playing Rocket. And as you mentioned, this guy, he's experienced. He knows he knows how to run an inside zone and knows the playbook. So I don't blame them from that standpoint. But to go to what you're saying about the potential of the ground and pound run game, we talked about that running back room and how reloaded it is with Rocket and Oscar Adaway and Jordan Howell, and not to mention the guys DJ Braswell and those guys. Matthew Fuller. So they got a deep running back room, and the potential is there. It's just the key is the offensive line is just going to have to get the run game or run blocking going. And I think having Lenora Sellers as a true run threat is going to help open up the run game too. Because nothing against Spencer Rattler, but he was just more of the sit in the pocket and throw it around the yard, but who could also get out, but was not your true Lenora Sellers run threat. So having Lenoris and that threat to run, I think is going to help open up not only the running backs run game, but then even help out the passing game as well.
No doubt about it. So you guys will, after you hop off this call, you'll head over for defensive player interviews. And, I don't really know if on the defensive front, if it really matters who starts. Last week, one of the players was asked how they would rotate on the defensive line, and even somebody asked Shane Beamer about it after Saturday's scrimmage, and they said it like in hockey shifts, to where you just constantly running guys off. You look at it, you've got 8 edge guys that legitimately could play and 6 defensive tackles, and that's if you're in a 4-man front. If you go to the 3-man front, you could play Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Sanders, or Boogie Huntley, or DeAndre Jules, and Tonka Hemingway all at the same time in a 3-man front. But Gilbert Edmond, JT Gear, Elijah Davis, Kyle Kennard, Dylan Stewart, Brian Thomas Jr., Desmond Umeozulu, and on Sunday, and not a real surprise. We'll see if it sticks or not. Wendell Gregory working with the edge guys now listed at 6'3", 245, and he basically was an edge player in high school and at Marietta Walton, where they played DeBron Gatling's team for the 7A state championship. Not so surprising, but when you look at it compared to last year, I mean, it is like night and day in the front. And, you know, it could depend on, are you playing a four-man? How much four-man front? How much three-man front? And then are some of these guys capable of being the third linebacker, or will it be Bam Martin Scott?
Yeah, up front, I mean, the depth that they have there this year is a night and day from last year, and I think it's the best it's been in quite a while. I mean, let's start or think about the interior. You got the trio of guys who probably get the most talked about in Boogie Huntley, TJ Sanders, and Tonka Hemingway. I think the biggest thing that's going to help them this year is that depth, because they can have a guy like DeAndre Jules come in or Monkel Goodwine who can, you know, take some snaps and are good players in themselves. But those guys are not going to have to play every snap like they were this past season. And I think that's going to benefit them every game. And then in the end of the season, they'll be more fresh. And then you think about it, end, like they have 4 or 5, at least, maybe even 6 dudes who they can count on at edge this year. And Sterling Lucas and those guys have mentioned hockey shifts. And I think they can do that this year, which is only going to help their legs during games. And, you know, same thing with those interior guys. Like, it's going to pay off at the end of the season. And all those guys can really make impacts. I mean, Dylan Stewart, you know, may not start, but has the potential to start, and it's going to make a big impact this year. So the potential up front on the defensive line is really, really good for South Carolina.
I mean, no doubt about it. Trey, I'm getting ready to answer your question. Give me just a minute. So we know Debo Williams is going to start at linebacker. Bam Martin Scott's really more of a Sam or a Jack outside linebacker. I mean, who have you got penciled in as the other starting linebacker? I'm kind of leaning towards Demetrius Knight, but it could be Bangali Kamara. And then last week, I thought one of the greatest interplayer interviews ever was Mo Kaba, and his resolve, his resilience, his determination. He says, "Look, I'm damn near 100%, and I'm getting my spot back, and I got 3 years of eligibility left to show what I can do." I mean, how stunned were you when you heard him say that?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, a lot of respect to him to go through 3 torn ACLs and still want to, you know, come back and continue chasing that dream, because I imagine going through 3 rehabs is just brutal for that. And, you know, for him, and the big question is, like, can he get back to who he was before the injury? And I think you have to wonder about that a little bit, just because of, you know, we've seen how ACL injuries can slow down players when they come back, but he's got the resolve in him, and I think he's going to give it everything he can. And anything that he can give you, that linebacker room is a plus, especially with the depth that they have. And you mentioned Demetrius Knight, and he's a guy who I kind of circled coming into camp as a guy I'm really intrigued to learn more about and see how he did, because, you know, when you look at what he did at Charlotte, he was an impact player at Charlotte, and he's big and he's fast. So, you know, I think in that if they run some 3 linebacker sets, I think he's going to be in there. And regardless if they do, that guy's going to play a lot, because I think he's really taken on a leadership role for this team, being an older guy, and I think he's got big potential this year.
Yeah, I mean, they really only had about a 3-man rotation until late in the season at linebacker. Now you got Debo Williams, Demetrius Knight, Bangali Kamara is a guy that I think could really be an X factor at linebacker. You got Bam Martin Scott and J.R. Johnson, who I think could kind of be that Sam or Jack linebacker. And then you got Mo Kaba and Jaron Willis. And I mean, from what I know from people that have known Mo Kaba since he was a freshman in high school, I'm not counting this guy out of being on the depth chart. Now, let's be more sensible with the guy this year than last year. Let's not have him running downfield on the opening kickoff. Okay, he doesn't need to be on that team because that's when he tore his ACL. A lot of old Gamecocks remember Lawrence Mitchell. He did that, and then he played one or two series before they finally had to get him out of the game. But I'm not totally counting him out because the guy looks like $1 million. He certainly mentally knows this defense inside and out. And I think his determination and resolve, I just don't think it can be understated. So, Trey, to answer your question, the first Carolina calls will be next Thursday, August 22nd at 6 p.m. with the voice of the Gamecocks, Todd Ellis, at Backstreet's Grill at 6 p.m. And so William also says he hopes Mokaba, or that was Trey that asked about that. William hopes Mo stays healthy and calls Lenora Sellers, potentially Cam Newton with glasses. I think Gamecock Nation, we would definitely take that, minus stealing the laptop at Florida and throwing it out the dorm window as the police raid your dorm. I don't think we have to worry about that with Lenoris. But, you know, Mike Shula is a guy that's been around Cam Newton, right? He was the quarterback's coach or the offensive coordinator when Cam Newton was MVP in the National Football League and led the Panthers to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, I certainly think we would take that. So, at linebacker, what'd be your guess other than Debo Williams on if they're just playing two and if they're playing three, who would be your best bets as of today?
Yeah, so if it's two, I'd say obviously Debo and Bam Martin Scott. You know, if the hamstring is the injury that he has is fine. Like, and we all know how hamstring injuries can be, but you know, it sounds like he said last week he's going to be getting back real soon and has been doing some stuff at practice. So I don't think it's too serious. So I'd say Bam Martin Scott, and if it's three, I would say Demetrius Knight is the third one in that group.
All right, so I mean, every position in the secondary seems to be settled except one cornerback spot. At the other cornerback spot, it looks like it's going to be O'Donnell Fortune. Certainly the coaching staff has a lot more confidence in him than I do. I think he's just been average over the course of his career, but maybe he can be your Xavier Legette breakout player on defense this year. At nickel, Jalen Kilgore, he ended the season there. I am kind of intrigued to see what Jalewis Solomon and Kelvin Hunter do at that nickel spot. And then you could, if you went to a dime look, you could probably move DQ Smith up and he could be your dime linebacker, and Kilgore could be at safety with Nick Eamon-Wari, and you could have another corner in there like Jalewis Solomon or Vakari Swain if Judge Collier's starting over him. But it's really that corner spot, Judge Collier, Vakari Swain, and Emory Floyd. How would you handicap that?
Yeah, we've discussed this multiple times. I think we'll know more after the second scrimmage who's going to land that starting spot. But, you know, when you think about it, Judge Collier has the experience, and maybe not experience. He started a few games last year and did play a little bit. So I think I would lean towards him right now to land that spot. But Vakari Swain's a real playmaker. And, you know, you saw in that video that Hale put up, you know, he locked down the receiver in that one video. So I think regardless of who starts, both of those guys, including Emory Floyd too, are going to play a lot. Like, and I think that Old Dominion game I'm not sure it really will matter who starts in that game. I think that's going to be a game where they just play everybody to see, who plays the best or whatnot, and then we'll see that Kentucky game, who's going to start, because that's obviously I guess you could say, more pivotal and more difficult game. So, a lot, regardless, throughout the season, all those guys are going to play, and they seem to have some depth there at corner and nickel and really safety as well.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like David Spalding could be spending some time at corner. But it appears, as of today, probably Judge Collier is more fundamentally sound. And Judge Collier's out there instead of Bakari Swain, who probably is more athletic and who does flash more, but's just not as consistent with the fundamentals, every single play. And I think that's why at this point Judge Collier has the edge. But with the athleticism, there's no denying Bakari Swain may be the most spectacular athlete in the entire secondary group, which is saying a lot when you got Nick Emanwari and Jalen Kilgore back there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think back to what Bakari Swain did in high school. Like, he did it at a high level on both sides of the ball, at corner and at wide receiver. And, I guess when you look at it statistically, he was better on the at wide receiver, but I think you'd expect that in high school. But no doubt, I mean, he's extremely athletic, and I think just the key for him is just continue to be more consistent, each play. But I think, he's got a chance to be a playmaker this year. And, I was talking to Clayton White and Torian Gray before camp. They both mentioned just how dynamic he is. So I think they have high hopes for him and continue to work on him in camp.
All right, so perfect segue into special teams. I mean, we know who the punter's going to be. Kai Kroger, he appears to be healthy. Last year he was not healthy, and I think that kind of affected his fundamentals. They corrected, keeping his elbow in a little bit on the drops, which has helped his consistency. I'm fully expecting him to return to that All-American form of 2022. I think they'll find a kickoff guy, but Alex Herrera missed all of spring. I would still handicap him as the favorite, but Alex, he's never attempted a field goal in a college game. He has kicked some garbage time extra points. If it's 21-20 and you're trailing Kentucky and you're 4th and 7 at the 30 with 19 seconds to go, are you trotting him out there for a 47-yarder? I mean, you probably have to, right? But what if it's 4th and 1 at the 30? Then are you kicking it, or are you running another play?
Yeah, I guess it just depends on the situation, time of the game, and all that. But I think that's a question that has to be answered. Shane Beamer after the scrimmage mentioned that he wants to see some more consistency in that kicking battle, and it's kind of crazy that we're talking about a kicking battle at South Carolina, because it feels like for a long time now, starting with Elliott Fry and then Parker White and Mitch Jeter, that it's really been solidified in preseason camp who the kicker is going to be. But Shane Beamer mentioned he's like, they're fine. Like, we're going to keep putting them in pressure situations to, with team stuff on the line to make a kick. And, I think this is a big week for the kickers to kind of push themselves away and, see who can win that starting job.
I mean, I think this competition will go right down to the wire. Yeah. I mean, you kind of got spoiled with Mitch Jeter and Parker White and even Elliott Fry before him. And this is the first time in years, Mitch Jeter and Herrera, they did battle it out a couple of years ago, but, Jeter ultimately won out, and his was a kickoff guy as a freshman. After Parker White left, took over, and I think he was 23 for 25 in his career. Both misses were from like 52, 53 plus yards. And he had the Stones in Death Valley 2 years ago to go out. South Carolina's trailing 30-28, and he split the uprights with what ended up being the game-winning field goal in the fourth quarter of that game. So that's a big battle. I'm really intrigued on who the returners are going to be, because Vakari Swain was an electric kick returner. Xavier Leggette's gone. Jalen Kilgore returned punts. Could we see Vakari Swain returning punts? Who's returning kickoffs? How would you handicap the return game as far as who the returners are?
Yeah, when we've been out at practice, they've really had a bunch of guys out there who have been doing both punts and kickoffs. One being Nick Harbor doing the kickoffs, which I could see that. Like, it'd make a lot of sense for him to be returning kickoffs with his speed and then just his size to be able to run through contact. I think at punt returner, you have to look at Kilgore. Just, he did a pretty solid job last year when he stepped in there. But as we mentioned with Vakari Swain, that guy is just a playmaker, and it would not surprise me one bit to see him back there on kickoffs or punt returns this year at all.
I agree. So, Alex, I can't thank you enough for jumping on with us. I know you got duty with the defensive player. We look forward to reading your notes and what they have to say today. Tell us what is coming up on TheBigSpurcom. I know you guys are laser focused on football, but you got a new addition. Tell us about your new addition to the team, who's going to be covering women's basketball this year at TheBigSpur.com.
Yeah, Joe Machika should be joining us here pretty soon. I think he starts maybe later in the week, but really excited about him to kind of handle that women's basketball duty, and then kind of help out with football a little bit. But we're real excited for him to join the staff here. And as far as what we got coming up, obviously we're 17 days away, and a lot of we won't get to see any practice anymore, but we got a lot of press conferences coming up, and then we're really starting to get into more of a game week type of feel next week as we're getting closer and closer to game week.
All right, and so I guess I'm really interested in next week, right? Because after the second scrimmage is on Saturday, the players are going to be off on Sunday and Monday. Then on Tuesday, it'll kind of be like a regular game week. Beamer will be out on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday we'll get to hear after practice number 21 from the coordinators. And I'm really interested. I mean, Clayton White really doesn't like to say a whole lot, so I don't know how to be with him. But Dow Loggins, unless it's a Shane Beamer question, and then we'll probably hear from Joe D. Camillus as well. And so how intrigued are you going to be for those coordinator interviews next week?
Yeah, we haven't gotten to talk to the coordinators since, day before preseason camp and media day. So it'd be really interesting to get their thoughts on where they think both groups have progressed through camp, and any questions that have to be answered, they still want to be answered before the season starts. But should get a lot of interesting details from them heading into game week.
No doubt. Well, Alex, I can't thank you enough. Appreciate you being on as always. Good luck. Get some rest when you can. Stay hydrated, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
I appreciate it. I always enjoy being on.
All right. That is the great Alex Jones from TheBigSpur.com. All right. So if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Hit the like button. Give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcast. If you want more of this podcast, if you enjoy listening or watching the free live show on Wednesday, Gamecock Pod Live. Certainly, Gamecock Pod Daily, we would love to have all of you join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual VIP subscriber, where you get this podcast every single day, Monday through Friday. On Sunday, you get the morning after, which is really the most popular podcast during football season. Doesn't matter if the Gamecocks have an open date or not. Every Sunday morning, we're dropping a pod on the previous day of college football, and in particular on the Gamecocks. And on Tuesday nights, we have the Garnet and Black Town Hall. It's a live interactive Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. We've been doing it since the pandemic, and I've really met a lot of great people, and a lot of these guys and gals, we all know South Carolina women, they love their football and they know their football a lot better than a lot of dudes do. I can't tell you just the amount of friendships, coming back to games, seeing people, meeting people at the bowl game, hanging out. But the Garnet and Black Town Hall is like going down to your favorite sports bar and chatting it up with your favorite Gamecocks and friends, blowing off steam, talking about your concerns, being optimistic, asking questions, making comments on all Gamecock sports. We cover it all, not just football and basketball and baseball. Nobody's going to cover women's basketball like Gamecock Pod Daily. So you'll be able to hear great guests every single day, like Alex Hale and John Whittle from the Big Spur. Mike Uva, our good friend at Gamecock Central, will still be on from time to time. It's Peyton Titus and Jordan Kay from Go Gamecocks. It's time for us to get Brad Crawford and Michael W. Bratton, the host of that SEC podcast, back on, and many more as well. So follow the show on Twitter at Gamecock Pod. Follow me on Twitter at K Allsep. Go to the top of the homepage. You can click the link. You can get there, or you can go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Gamecock Pod Daily. All lower letters, no spaces. And if all else fails, just hit that Monopoly search engine, Google. Google's my go-to. I don't care what they call it. And type in Gamecock Pod Daily. You can find it. You can sign up. A month's subscription is like one trip per month to Starbucks. So for Alex Jones, this has been Gamecock Pod Daily or Gamecock Pod Live for August the 14th, episode number 1544. And today would have been my mom's 83rd birthday. God rest her soul. She died in early November of 2016 from Alzheimer's. She's probably the strongest, coolest woman I've ever known in my life. I still miss her. And so happy birthday, Mom. I know you're watching down from heaven. So that'll do it for today. We'll be back tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily. Sign up, join. You'll love it. I guarantee it. Until then, Keith Allsep saying God bless, go Gamecocks, and have a great rest of your day. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. I'm out of here.